Um, I am so excited and happy that Rama Bijapurkar was available to speak with us today because she is one of the foremost marketing thought leaders in India. I think India Inc. has her on speed dial for all of her insights. And she has also been a friend of the family. If I say how long, I'll date us both, so I will not do that. But she has written very well followed books on consumer India, and she has a keen pulse on the culture of the country and what is driving it, not just describing it, but what are the drivers behind it. And she is also a very voracious writer. You can scarcely talk about open a newspaper in India without seeing her very incisive and humorous commentaries. So I'm super excited, but I do want to just spend a minute saying she's had 3 best-selling books: We Are Like That Only, The Never Before World, and Customer in the Boardroom. And she also is an IIM Ahmedabad graduate and has been invited to be on many global boards as well, including the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. So you're in for a real treat. Rama, thank you again for being here.
Deepa, this is such a special honor and privilege for me. I wish Dad could have heard you today. He was always proud of you. He would be even prouder. And this is really Garje Marathi and Deepa, Ashwin, Manapurvak Abhar for having. So yes, I am a student of Dr. Prahlad's, and in fact, he wrote the foreword to my first book, where he summarized in one sentence what I was trying to say in an entire book. And he's done that to me often enough. And I said to him on occasion that that's what makes you C.K. Prahlad, and that's what makes me just a consulting hack. But I am, like most people here, a ardent devotee, there's no other word for it, and practitioner of his extraordinary ideas. And I often think that one man sitting in one place can repeatedly give the world of business ideas that are transformative, which you see now flung around all the time. People talk about core competence all the time. People talk about the bottom of the pyramid all the time. People talk about competing for the future all the time. What extraordinary mind is that produced all this? And it's, I think, one of the most intellectually fertile minds there ever was, with extraordinary business intuition and wisdom. I mean, we all know that, but I guess without an invocation to the Guru, we cannot proceed any further. So that is my gratitude to the universe for having put me in touch with someone like him. So today I just want to share the journey that India has been through in looking, India Inc. in specific, in looking at this whole fortune at the bottom of the pyramid idea. And I think not long ago, even as late as early 2000, people would be discussing what is the size of India's consumer base? What is the size of India's consumer market? This is a very strange question. The assumption is that you would have the size of India's consumer market would have as many consumers as there are Indians. But when people, and you see this in all the big consulting reports, and I think people were basically saying, what is the size of the number of people who earn above a certain amount of money so that we can comfortably target them and we can call them customers? So it was like business saying, this is my bar, and if you, consumer, can leap over that bar, then you qualify to be a real consumer. Otherwise, you don't qualify to be a consumer. And that now, as we all know, is really not the way to do it, right? So it's like saying that if you're poor, you don't want your house painted. If you're below a particular income called the global middle class, or whatever it is that whoever it is decided was the cutoff arbitrarily, then you have no right to paint your house before Ladki Dekhne Jab someone will come. You don't want your house painted. You don't want a roof leaking that's patched up, even if the roof is blue tarpaulin. If you're a farmer, you have no right to want to sweat a machine rather than sweat your body. So these were all the assumptions of what we thought real consumers were and real consumers weren't. And so you had books that said India's $10 trillion market by 2030, India's 300 million consumers, whereas actually we have a lot more than that. And in actual fact, there was consumption happening amongst the poor. Consumption that Dr. Prahlad has talked about, where you're paying a penalty because you're poor. It's a poverty penalty. It's a small quantity penalty. There are needs. There are affordability limits. And I think the question that Fortune at the bottom of the pyramid asks is, why are you leaving them out of business? And why can't you bring them into the fold? Now, what interested me was that there were so many multinationals. I mean, I have seen practically every multinational board that has come into India since liberalization. And the reason I'm asked to speak to them is because I have no career to lose, and the sitting managing director has a career to lose. So I can say it like it is. And in every one of those boards, they would say, when will India be ready for us? Again, the same story that I come from. So if you think about it, India is a large GDP. It's in single digits in world GDP ranking. But if you look at it in ranking of per capita GDP, which is how rich people are, it's about 133. That's true of China, Brazil, etc. as well, but more acutely with us. So we are a large economy, which we love to say, but made up of lots and lots of very modest income people. So on the other hand, if you look at the US, if you look at Europe, they are a large economy made up of few people who earn and spend a lot. We're a large economy made up of a lot of people who earn and spend a little. Now, clearly, all the business economics that have been designed for those countries just don't work here. Because if you transplant a model from elsewhere in the world and bring it here with those economics, then you can only serve the top of that pyramid that Deepa showed, just a tiny little bit of the top of the pyramid. And you keep waiting for the rest of the pyramid to come up to your standards. And the answer is it doesn't. Off late, we're finally hearing language change, but language change doesn't mean you resource it. It doesn't mean you have, I mean, every multinational I know now has an emerging market innovation cell. But to actually put conviction behind it, to say that this is going to be the customer that I'm going to serve and I'm going to add value to and extract value from, that's a whole different thing. So now you really need Indian companies who are ready to do this. Why Indian companies don't do it is another story altogether. Of course, there are stunning examples of those that do, which have been documented well. But often, in between, a lot of Indian companies went overseas and said, I will earn 70 rupees to $1. And they leveraged Indian balance sheets and went overseas. When that picnic sort of got over and they couldn't really make it, they couldn't really continue to roll over their loans, they came back to India. In the meanwhile, again, the same issue, the rich were growing fast. The top 20% of India is actually India's middle class. It earns and spends significantly more than everybody else. So a lot of companies said that if we work with that 20% and grow with that 20%, hey, that's a very nice jewel in the crown business. Do I really want to work very hard? Do I really want to struggle to serve a lower income consumer? Why don't I just keep it aside and wait till the lower income consumer's income rises at a point in time? So that is a logic that people have worked with. I call it, why do you want to kiss the frog in the hope that he will become the prince when you can kiss the prince directly? So we gave licenses to small banks. The idea of small finance banks was that they would focus on serving the less rich part of India. But slowly, there is always a temptation to creep upwards. But some things have changed, and I'll tell you about that as we go along. But we've had obviously stunning examples. Many of them have been documented originally by CK, whether it was the Arvind Eye Hospital, the Sachet story. There are lots of grassroots innovators that Dr. Mashelkar's devotee, like I am, Anil Gupta, writes about. And I think that the interesting thing is that 40% of consumption in India is actually occurring at what we would call the bottom of the pyramid. So 40% of India's income and spend is occurring there. These are people who are aspiring to a better life. If you ask me to sum up one thing that is common to all Indians, we want to give our children escape velocity. We want a better life day by day, which is why we're so excited when we actually see highways that work. We're excited when we see air-conditioned buses. We're excited when we see when we see cell phones that we can afford. And so, is there fortune at the bottom of the pyramid? Obviously, there is. There has always been. Did we as business know how to get our hands on it? The answer is no, we didn't really. Did we want to get our hands on it? I think we wanted to get our hands on it, but India always, you have to look at the pain and the gain, and a lot of people decided that the pain was not worth the gain. Now, how do you actually serve this market? Interestingly, what happened along the way is that China came. The entire lower income market of India is served by China. Today, if you look at any of your household help, they are wearing a new sari every other day. And it is 100 rupees, it's 50 rupees, it's 80 rupees. China has huge factories. People talk about how the costs are low, whether they're legitimately low or not legitimately low is besides the point. What we actually have is China who is serving practically every need of us, including our Ganesh idols, as you know. So the challenge for serving this market is how do you deliver to a group of people the benefit that they are looking for at a cost that they can afford, made at a cost that makes you profitable. Even if you do the first two right, you usually get the second wrong. So think about it as a tightrope walk. If you get the cost to the affordability to them and the cost to you right, then you get the benefit all wrong. And a lot of people have tried in the past and burnt their fingers where they've said to lower income people, this is your auqat, this is all you need. You know, why do you need the convenience? So this whole business of no frills that people love to talk about. You know, is a remote control on a TV a frill? If you are an elderly grandmother left at home because there's no one to take care of you and you have arthritis, I think that it is what keeps you from going out of your mind. It is a functionality, not a frill. I bought a low-priced phone for older people, and it's a good example. I bought it actually for my mother, and she threw it back at me 4 days later, and she said to me that it doesn't have an outbox that tells me what messages I've sent. And I said, why do you want an outbox, or why do you want any way by which you know what messages you've sent? It's not important to you. You just need to send messages. And she said, I'm old. I can't remember whether I sent you a message or not. And if I keep sending you repeat messages, you get angry with me. And so what I really need is a certain kind of functionality that you think is not important to me. And there are just so many stories of what is no frills that actually is important. And we continue, for example, for a long time, you know, people ask the question, oh, is poor India ready for digital embrace? The entire country, by the way, has learned to use a cell phone, whether you're literate or not literate. Technology literacy has thankfully come in and saved a lot. You know, I have a lot of household help who can't read and write, and now I can show them a YouTube video, put a picture against all the phone numbers on their cell phones, and you know, life works and works quite well. In actual fact, lower income people want technology because technology provides you status blind service. They will tell you that I'd rather do an IVR than face that person. If I go to an ATM, the ATM doesn't judge whether I speak English or not, whether I want 2 rupees or 20 rupees or 2,000 rupees that I'm withdrawing. And so actually the poor love technology. They also process value. I mean, when we say let us deliver value to them, we have to look at the computer and the heads by which they process value. I once remember asking a lower income lady who is a beautician who comes to people's houses, I said, why do you have 2 pay channels in your house for movies? Isn't that a waste of time? And she said to me, I have 2 teenage sons at home. So if they step out of home, they spend money. So it's better to keep them at home. So if I do my calculation of benefit minus cost, 2 pay channels is paisa vasool. She also said that my mother-in-law then stays at home so that she can watch movies at home, not go to her daughter's house. As a result of which she cooks for me and I can come to your house and you're paying me a premium because you are away at work till late at night. Now, there are just so many examples of how value processing is done in ways that we neither understand nor we respect. And I think that's really another roadblock in this whole journey of trying to manage this benefit to you that you is acceptable to you, cost to me to make it as a business, and to make the whole thing profitable. Now things have changed and changed dramatically, and that's the most exciting thing in India, and that is the arrival of everything digital. Earlier, banking services used to say, oh no, we can't serve poor people, let the public sector do it, because the cost income ratio, the cost to serve them and the income that they actually give us is not good enough. Today, we're doing banking services for rural, poor, without even putting bank branches there, because we have a human ATM, a person who goes with a cell phone and a biometric. You put your thumb there, it pings the Aadhaar database. It says you are truly you, and this human ATM does the transaction and gives you the money that you want and does whatever transactions you need. Of course, where there are human beings in India, there is always corruption, jugaad, and stuff like that. But I think we're getting better and better again with the use of technology. The Prime Minister had a scheme called Pradhan Mantri something something Accident Insurance Yojana, where if you paid some 25 rupees premium, you would actually get 2 lakhs worth of accident benefit. I worked on at that time on the board of a private insurer who said to me that they had, on a fully loaded basis, made money on this product because everything was digitally done. The request came in on SMS, everything was handled digitally. Costs of doing things digitally come crashing down. And they said on a fully costed basis, they actually made money. And I said to them that there are 2 things you've said to me all along. Oh, insurance is never bought, it is sold. Here are people queuing up to buy it. And the second thing is that the Prime Minister seems to know something we don't. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be. But the more and more we're looking at it, we're looking at remote agricultural services, which are now possible because there are sensors who can tell someone sitting far away what's wrong with your ground. There are lots of things that we now know that have been written about. But now that digital is ubiquitous, costs have come crashing down. India Inc. has really no excuse to not want to serve lower income, and more people who are born in the digital age are coming out and saying that's the part of society I want to serve. Another more interesting thing that Deepa has alluded to is the rise of the sharing and aggregation economies. So if you take Ola or Uber, we've all the time talked about how sachets are such a great thing, right? Reduce the size, use as you need, as often as you want. I can't afford to buy a car, but I can afford to rent a portion of a car to take my family to a wedding. Earlier, it was more difficult to do. Today, with an Ola, it is easier to do. The Ola comes to my doorstep, etc., etc., etc. It's the same with Oyo rooms, Oyo weddings. It's the same with places that you can rent for a very short period of time. And now with digital, it makes it all so much easier to actually do. I have a friend who has a business that rents agri-equipment. So with the efficiencies that this allows you to do, where you know who needs it, who doesn't need it, where equipment ought to be, where the demand ought to be, everybody can actually manage to make money the way it is meant, where you're giving them the real thing, letting them share the part that they require and therefore pay less. And on your side, you actually know how to sweat the asset to make money on it. And that's the same with cloud kitchens. You're right that everybody, Deepa, when you talk about how there are little old ladies who are cooking in their kitchens and able to serve a much wider catchment area. There are people who are aggregating 10 such little ladies and offering me 1 dish for when I want, just that little bit extra when I have guests for dinner. So it's really exciting that we've finally been able to get costs right. We've got a whole new model. Like everything in India, if someone shows us the way, we will take it and we will run with it and we will do better on it as we go forward. And so I think that at long last, after having watched people say, it's a great idea, but how do you make money on it? It's a great idea, but I can make money elsewhere. There is a whole group of people who are young people, who are getting funded, who are unicorns, who are really embracing this idea and saying, hey, now with agricultural reforms, I'm seeing a lot of ag tech companies saying, hey, now it's my turn. I can actually do this. The other bit of good news is that incomes have gone up. I was just looking at some data that my think tank puts out. Income, the lowest 20%, the poorest 20% of India have grown their income 4.5 times between 1995 and 2020. I remember attending a seminar by CK, and he had a 2x2 quadrant. He usually had only 1 or 2 slides, right? And the one slide was like a killer slide. And in this one, he had a slide which basically said that he was waiting for India to have world-class products with world-scale markets. And I've just been looking at data, and today, if you look at urban and rural, at the lower end, incomes have more or less equalized, which is the speciality of what we got right on our policy. It is also true that they have the same exposure levels. It is also true that now there are roads, there are connects, there's the internet, there is a certain uniformity of shared experiences. And hey, we have incomes that rise, we have digital that is crashing costs, we have identical exposures, we have scale markets, we have the ability to produce world class. And there is absolutely no reason why we aren't going to pioneer and serve the hell out of the bottom of the pyramid going forward. So thank you, CK, on behalf of every Indian. Thank you, Deepa, for inviting me here. And to you and Gayatri for always considering me a part of your family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Rama. Excellently put.